Thank you all so much for coming. I will encourage anyone who is still in the back. There are 2 rows of seats up here, so there's more than enough space. We encourage you to come join in on the conversation. But thank you again. I want to start off just by introducing myself. My name's Andrea Ewing. I'm the Entrepreneur Engagement Advisor here with Rev1. I help to put on this event and also get entrepreneurs into our process. So we're always excited to see new faces here. So with that, how many of you, or for how many of you, is this your first time at Rev1 Ventures? Awesome, exciting. So we are a venture development organization. You can kind of think of us as part accelerator, part VC. And so we provide services to entrepreneurs. So not only do we, help them at the earliest stages when they maybe just have an idea on the back of a napkin, but we can help to, fuel their growth with investment and things along the way. So if you have any questions on that, there's a bunch of Rev1 staff around. We'd be more than happy to expand on that as well. But to get started today, we're really excited to have a special announcement about the Start Fund. And so I'm going to turn it over to Charles Hill. So if everyone can give him a big round of applause.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. My name is Charles Hill. I'm the Director of Community Outreach here at Rev1. So excited to be here today. So excited about what we're going to share with you here today, and so excited about seeing you all here because we're here absolutely just for you all. So before I get started real quick, we're going to talk about the Start Fund that we got started up a few months back here. And before I get started, the Advisory Committee, if you can come up and join me real quick on the stage. Advisory Committee, if you could join me up here real quick for a special presentation. I think I see Anthony. Mr. Tom Walker, could you join me up here, sir? Christy Campbell, could you join me up here, please? And we'll make sure we got everybody from the Start Advisory Group. And I know we got some coming here. But I didn't do this all on my own. So we got some help here, and we got a lot of people that put this thing together. So what is Start? Start is an entrepreneurship giving fund that we started, really with the spirit of creating a culture of giving within inside the companies. And the reason why we want to do that is our CEO and a lot of other folks around here in this organization had always got the question, do our entrepreneurs give back? So we wanted to create a culture of giving and give an opportunity and a platform for all of us to come together under one umbrella, so to speak, for the Start Fund. So I'm really excited about here that we wanted to tackle big problems, big issues with Start initiatives here in the community. So we got together with a lot of our community partners here to help give us this data we have here right now. So the group that we're excited to, Andrew, do you have the, sorry. If y'all can part the Red Sea real quick. How we came up with the initiatives that we wanted to give to the group that we're going to give to today is in these 4 broad buckets. One is connecting communities, STEM education, sustainable foods, and workforce development. I'm really excited to say that the group that we're going to give the award to in our first ever grant for the Start Fund has actually hit all 4 of these. So we're really excited about that. And what these are, as far as initiatives that we have to start, are things that you can actually vote on as far as for what areas that you wanted to actually see the community change in. So without further ado, I wanted to bring up some representatives because our first grant we want to give out, help me give a big warm welcome for the Franklinton Gardens. This is Heather Langerman and Patrick Kaufman. They're here to tell you about the initiative.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather Langerman. I'm so happy to be here and so excited about this award and wanted to thank Charles and all of the advisory committee for this very special occasion. We'll tell you a little bit about Franklinton Gardens in a minute, but just wanted to say thank you and we're so excited for everything to come and all the work that we can do together. Just let me introduce Patrick real fast, sorry about that. Patrick is a staff member at Franklinton Gardens. He's on the ground every day doing program development and community outreach. He's actually been with Franklinton Gardens since the beginning, since 2007. So he's been on the ground for about, 8 years, 9 years doing this work. So happy to introduce him.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks again to Start and to all of those folks who have been working really hard to make this a reality. The mission of START really resonates with me personally and with our organization, Franklinton Gardens, because the mission is really about improving lives, improving opportunities for people who live and work in Columbus. Franklinton Gardens is a nonprofit urban farm. We're located on the west side of Columbus in a neighborhood called Franklinton. Many of you have probably heard a lot about our neighborhood. Over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of development that's been taking place in our community, and it's been described as an up-and-coming community. The neighborhood's been around for a really long time, longer than any of us. It's been around since 1797, and it currently is home for about 9,000 folks. And many of those individuals and those families, for them, it's not so much an up-and-coming community. But it's a place that they've called home for a really long time. And it's a place in which they've struggled with a wide variety of social, economic, environmental justice issues. So for us as a farm, we view the food system, we view agriculture as a means of improving lives, as a means of creating opportunity with and for our neighbors. So as our neighbors continue to struggle to access fresh, healthy food to put on the plates for themselves and for their family members, as they struggle to find meaningful, fair-paying work, as they continue to struggle to just simply make it day by day, as many of the folks in our community don't have a high school diploma or no real opportunity that comes about from that. The work that we're doing at Franklinton Gardens is about improving food access. It's about creating economic opportunity for our neighbors, and it's about building equitable community for all. The way in which we're going to utilize this grant is through the creation of an education coordinator position. It's going to touch on all 4 of those themes that you saw up there: education, workforce development, food, and and connecting communities. Thank you. This grant is going to, as I said, be seed money for this new staff position. The staff position is going to help us to build out some educational programming at one of our newer sites, the Learning Garden site, which is at the corner of Town and Hawks, and that's located right next to Gladden Community House, next to Avondale Elementary School, and it's going to be a tremendous resource for the community as we continue to work out all of those themes in our neighborhood. So once again, thank you so much for your support.
So as you heard from Patrick, this is why we really fell in love with the Franklinton Gardens. We really felt a push to be able to give back to this opportunity. We got a lot of good initiatives that came to us, and it was really hard paring it down. But Franklinton Gardens, as you can see, really won out from all the work that they're doing right here. So on behalf of the START committee and Rev1 and all of the startup community, we would like to present you with a check for $5,000 for our first grant. Let's give it up for Franklinton Gardens. Like to, oh yeah, come in. And Carter, if you can join us too. Carter's with the Columbus Foundation, who helps manage our fund. Thank you. And the last thing, let's give it up one more time. And the last thing is that I really want to pound this home to you to let you know that, again, we want to start this thing as a culture of giving to create it in our community here. And not just with money we wanted to give back to these communities, but we also wanted to help with the volunteer aspect. So if you go to Franklinton Gardens, their website right here, franklinton.gardens.org, they have a volunteer opportunity. We want to be able to give back and have people on the ground to be able to actually help with this initiative. So Patrick drew that out. We would really like to have a lot of people to participate. So I know we got a lot of students in the room. We have a lot of participants here in the community. If this speaks to your heart, you can read about the whole new garden, new initiative, everything that's going on. But you can volunteer your time. You can bring your families there. You can actually help to be able to give back. We want to do more than just money. We really want to have boots on the ground to be able to help give back to the community that's given us so much. So this is where you can actually go and volunteer your services for Franklin's Garden. You can stop myself, Heather, or Patrick after we get done wrapped up here today, so you can take advantage of that. And here's some of the companies that actually helped us to be able to award this first grant. So we need more. In order to affect more lives, in order to affect more initiatives that's going on in the community right now, we need your help. So if you know of these, you all have START stickers on your chairs that we placed there. That's the website. You can actually go there. You can let people know about how to give. You can let people know how to submit initiatives that they want to get funded for. And then you can also volunteer your time, like we had said before. Here's the website, cbusstart.org. So you're more than welcome to go there, again, as we wrap up. And let's just give it up one more time for Franklinton Gardens. And last thing, we do plan on giving these grants out once per quarter. So we are in the running now for the next one that we will give out in the month of June. So you can, if you know of initiatives out there, good things that are going on in our community, have them reach out to us. And if you know people that want to be a part of this, have them reach out to us also. So our next give will actually be in the month of June, and I look forward to doing more good things out here in the community. So without further ado, I'll turn it right back over to Andrea, and then we'll get our guest speakers up for today.
Thank you so much, Charles. It's really awesome to see the impact that START's already making. I mean, we just rolled it out right around the holidays, right around Thanksgiving time, and to already have our first give to Franklinton Gardens, it's really exciting. So thank you again so much for being here. And Charles, thank you so much for running us through everything that's already happened so far and everything that's to come. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and we'll get started with our feature presentation. I'll go ahead and bring up Michael Kindred-Pratt. He is with Rev1. He works with the investment side of the team as well as OTAF. And then Don Wright, who is our featured speaker today. And I'll let Mike take it away.
Hello. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Rev1 Ventures. We have the pleasure of being joined today by Don Wright, who has the distinction of being employee number 1 at Assurex Health, which has been in the news quite a bit recently. If some of you are unfamiliar with Don's background, he served as co-founder, executive vice president, and COO of Assurex Health. It's a personalized medicine company helping clinicians determine the best medications for individual patients with various medical conditions. He helped take technology invented at the Mayo Clinic and Cincinnati Children's Hospital and built a company that employed nearly 500 people and treated more than 500,000 patients with mental health conditions. Along the way, the company raised capital from Ohio-based angel groups and funds, all the way to larger investors like Sequoia Capital, Claremont Creek, and Cross Creek Advisors. And in August of 2016, after nearly a decade working for the company, Assurex Health was acquired by Salt Lake City-based Myriad Genetics for up to $410 million. Don, welcome, and thank you very much for being here today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So this is a really cool opportunity to talk to you today. We've been running these founders lunches for about a year now, and we've had some incredible entrepreneurs that have come up here and shared their insights, and they're from all different stages of the capital life cycle. Some are just getting started out, some are right in the thick of it, raising their first financing round. But I think this is the first time that we've had somebody who has completely run the gamut, from being employee number 1 at the company all the way to selling it. So we have a lot to learn from you today. I've got some questions for you. I know our audience will have some awesome questions as well, but let's dig into it. So the title of this session is called The Big Exit, and we certainly want to get to talking to that today. But all successful stories have to start somewhere. So can you tell us a little bit about how Assurex was founded in the early days of the company?
Yeah, we had an idea, we got some money, and we succeeded. No.
It's that easy.
Didn't work that way at all. In 2006, actually before I was even involved in the company, Cincinnati Children's decided to spin out a really great technology that they had. They went to the original Cincy Tech and asked them to help them do that. Like many good startups. They got a whole $25,000 and decided they could start building software and building a lab. They also found out that Mayo Clinic had competing technology, and so they went out and talked to them, and they licensed that technology also. And that company lasted about 7 months, ran out of money, and went dark. You know, that's the typical startup story, right? Sorry, all of you who are doing startups, that's the typical startup story. Not the one you want, though. And about 4 months later, the new Cincy Tech decided that it was way too good of an idea, and it needed to be taken to the masses. It needed to help people. And so they decided to restart the company. And so some more money was put in. They came to me and literally called me one day and said, "We need your help in finding someone to build an informatics platform," which is startup code for come work for us for free for a long time and do a whole lot of other things, which was true. I hired my first employee, was a guy who had worked with me at multiple companies to build the informatics platform because, of course, I had no time to do that, even though that's what I was brought in to do. I got on Google and typed, "How do you build a molecular genetics lab in the state of Ohio?" True story. A lot of good information there. Found out a few things. One, you need bleachable surfaces so that you can clean up the DNA. And I was like, well, I can do that. I know what to do there. You need to develop assays. Actually, I can do that too because I had Mayo and Children's help, and it's not that hard to do the initial assays. It's a lot like informatics. And then you need to either be an MD or you need to be a PhD with at least 10 years experience running a genetics lab. And, you know, I went up online and tried to get my degree in molecular genetics, and it wasn't going to happen in time, so had to start looking for somebody to do that. And it was pretty difficult to find somebody who had the clinical side of it. A lot of people who had done the research side, and my other internet-related search was I went up into my LinkedIn page and I changed my status to Don desperately needs a lab director for his molecular genetics lab. And my background before that, other than a brief, I helped start SAS Capital, so I did some finance type stuff, but it was all informatics, all software. And about 600 of my 1,000 contacts in LinkedIn all wrote back and said something like, "Hey Don, how you doing? Good to hear from you. What the hell's a molecular genetics lab, and why would somebody trust you to run one?" And I said, "Thanks." And then this guy who I didn't like that much, who worked at a software company for me a long time ago, emailed me and said, "My next door neighbor's a lab director at a molecular genetics lab. You should meet her." And I said, "Well, you've always been an idiot, so there's no chance that's true. But send a CV." And as it turns out, she was an MD from Russia. She came to the United States, got her PhD, worked for the CDC, came to Cincinnati Children's, and unbelievably did her postdoc work in P450 genetics and how they affect drugs, which is exactly what Assurex does, and then had left and gone to a genetics company for 10 years and lived 1 mile from our office. And so that's employee number 3. So employee number 4 was Jim Burns, who was my partner for a long time in the company. He came a year after me, so for some context, first year in a garage in a strip mall, actually still in a garage in the strip mall until 3 years ago. 4 employees in the first year, and then we were hiring an average of about 15 to 20 people a week 2 years later. So the growth happened pretty fast once it started.
So a true garage story.
True garage story.
Tell us a little bit more about your background. Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or when did you decide to go that route?
No, so I started at Bell Labs, kind of the opposite of that. I then was at a little company that got bought and became the largest private software company in the United States, Attachmate Corporation, biggest software company nobody's ever heard of. and ran global product development for them, and had about 3,000 software developers and QA people and whatnot working for me, and decided that I describe it now as like being the captain of the Titanic. My guys would come in and they'd say, there's an iceberg 18 months out, and I'd say, well, turn right, and they would, and then we'd find out, 18 months later whether we crashed into it or not. I mean, these were the days where we literally had, some people in here will have no idea what I'm about to say. We made diskettes, and they had to be produced somewhere, so we had a whole building in Alpharetta, Georgia that produced diskettes, and then we moved up to CDs and DVDs, and we had to worry about things like when Princess died, Candle in the Wind came out, and they took over our whole facility to make DVDs and CDs for that event, and we couldn't produce software, right? Because there was no SaaS then, right? So no, I had no idea that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And as a matter of fact, SaaS Capital was going out of business. It's been reinvented by my original partner there. And I was walking through Lowe's buying lumber to build a treehouse for my kids when I got the call asking if I could come and take a look at this thing in Mason, Ohio. And it was interesting at first because it was 3 miles from my house, and it was genetics and it was software, and I got the bug pretty quick after I started doing it. But no, I didn't go into the company to be the entrepreneur.
So from the very beginning of the company, with you at the helm, the company had strong, steady growth throughout the time that you were there. Did you employ any kind of philosophy, or how did you go about thinking about growing the growth, both from the company standpoint as well as the customer standpoint?
So the interesting thing about our product is that there's a huge need for it. So there are about 500,000 prescriptions for mental health related drugs in the United States every year, which is outrageous number since there's only 320 million people in the United States. It's more than half of those people fail on those medications. And so the customer growth didn't require a lot. We had good technology, we had good studies that showed our product worked. We actually started figuring out that if we built sales territories around the United States, the salespeople started paying for themselves within 6 months. So growing that part of the company was really quite easy. The hard part was finding the good people, and we had a few. We originally thought pharma reps who had sold those types of drugs would be good, and then we realized pharma reps do a lot of detailing and don't do as much of the sales like a device salesperson did, so we kind of had to redo that. But that part was easy. The growing the people and growing the lab, as the COO, it was my job to have the plan, and as my partner would always tell me, I did a really crappy job of that constantly, but luckily I was able to react quickly. I remember the day we moved into our new lab, and we were there for about 3 weeks, and I was out at Mayo, and I got a call from our lab director, and she said, hey, every day this week we've received at least twice as many samples as we can handle in a day. And I said, that's fantastic. She's like, well, sure, except we haven't been asleep because we got them all out on time, so we just stayed here for the week and did them all night long. Also, we're going to run out of reagents by the end of the week, and we need to use your credit card to buy some more. I said, well, a couple of things. One, never run out of reagents. Always use my credit card. And when I get back, so I got back, we ordered like 22 more machines, which of course made our lab average about 98 degrees all day long. We had these NASA air conditioners brought in that shot the hot air out the top of the building for a while. It was quite a scene. And so the lab that was going to last us 5 years lasted us 5 weeks. And we moved across the street into a much bigger lab, which is now being expanded as we speak right now again. Growing the people was hard. We had days where 25 new employees would start, and we'd we'd stage them. We'd stage the first 10, and then we'd let them do some of the training for the next 10 later in the afternoon, because you just literally don't have enough people, right? I mean, if you have 55 people in your company and you add 25 on one day, what do you do, right? I mean, it was a mess for a while, but we got through it, and once we got some smarter people than me running some of the departments, you know, we were able to kind of push that out. But we grew. We did, you know, I say all that. Of course, we had a plan, right? We grew the company, I think, the right way, right? We originally hired the software developers and informatics people to build the platform that we needed, because we're a genetics company, but in reality, we're an informatics company, right? It's all about the algorithms. We could have used anybody's lab. We decided to build a lab ourselves because we could do some innovative things. We could control costs, and I could get products out when I wanted to instead of waiting for somebody else to build the assays for me. But we built the company around the informatics platform, and we used the scientists that we had licensed the technology from. Then we started hiring our own scientists. We hired our people who knew how to do studies. We did the clinical trials, and then we started hiring marketing and salespeople and customer support people. And of course, we hired lab people at the beginning too. So we always had enough, you know, when we were out of money, which was all the time until Sequoia finally put money in. I mean, like all the time. Like the company owed Jim and me almost $1 million. I had 3 mortgages on my house. We, you know, we had one rule. You pay your people, and you pay to keep the lab open. And everybody else, you know, I taught my admin things like, you know, it doesn't work to put like the Duke Energy thing in the Cincinnati Bell thing and stuff. They figure that out and they send it to each other. But what you can do when somebody calls is you can say, hey, today's Tuesday. We run checks on Thursday, but you gotta be in by Monday. So what I'll do is I'll get you a next week's check run, and I guarantee you that'll happen. By the way, do you take credit cards? Because I could pay it with a credit card, and then you pull out one of Don's credit cards and you pay it. The original lab was built on Jim's credit card and my credit card. I told my wife at the time. Jim did not tell his wife, so I got a call from Jim's wife asking what this $90,000 Luminex thing was on her American Express card. I explained to her that it was a really cool, that she owned it, right? Because the company couldn't pay for it. So if we went out of business, I would ship it to her house, and you know, it'll be a really cool looking, it's got a purple laser on the front of it. It'll be a really cool centerpiece for their kitchen, and people will like to talk about it.
So you mentioned Sequoia Capital. Obviously, along that growth, you had to raise some money, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs likely, when they first set out, you know, dream about being able to raise from a large company like Sequoia. So, can you talk to us a little bit about what that process was like? I mean, did you just call them up and say, "Hey, we're raising some money. You're interested?" How did you get introduced, and how did that process work?
Well, we didn't do it the Steve Jobs way, which was show up at the front door in his pajamas and convince them. I actually got to meet Don Valentine, who was one of the founders of Sequoia, and he confirmed that story, and he said that, you know, his biggest concern when Jobs showed up was not that he was wearing pajamas to the meeting, but that they didn't match, which made no sense to him. You know, I say all the time, I mean, you get away with that, or you just get kicked out, right? I mean, that's the most ridiculous story ever. Why he would do that? His answer was, I don't want to take money from anybody who would throw me out because I'm wearing pajamas. I say, well, you know, it's like in Bull Durham when they say, you know, you've got mold growing on your shower shoes. You can do that once you got 20 wins in the show, but you can't, you know, until you do that, you're a slob, right? Ours was very, so raising money sucked. It was 2008 and 2009, if you don't remember. 2007, 2008, and 2009, it's when banks were going out of business and VCs were hunkering down. Early stage VCs, we'd go to meet with them and they'd say you need to have at least $10 million in revenue for us to invest in you. And we would say that makes no sense because you're an early stage fund. And they would say, yes, but the world has gone to hell. They were holding back money because they knew that their current investments were going to need more money and weren't going to be able to get it anywhere else. And so they just weren't investing. Jim and I think we counted up one time, we probably met with at least 1,000 people, 1,000 people. Our original, so by that time we had been invested in by Queen City, by OTAF, and by North Coast. And we had some other angels and sidecars. We had like the Greater Cincinnati Health Foundation and those types of investors. Nobody had much more money to put in, nor were they going to put more money in when we couldn't prove that we could get money from anywhere else. Cincy Tech came along and put some money in, and Cincinnati Children's and Mayo invested in every round, which was nice, not just with technology, but they actually put money in from pension funds and things like that. But we weren't getting any traction, and we were traveling, we were driving to St. Louis, we were driving to Cleveland, we were driving anywhere you can drive to from Cincinnati, and we finally found a Michigan-based VC and a Louisville-based VC, which will remain nameless, got through the process, and on the day we were closing, they showed up for the close and told us that they wanted to change the deal. Literally that morning, that they wanted to tranche the deal, they wanted to remove Jim and put one of their partners in as the CEO, and when they tranched the deal, they were doing it in $1 million tranches on a $10 million deal. And there was criteria they had written down, but one of the criteria for each one of the tranches was at the full discretion of them, whether we've met that goal. And so the board got together in an emergency board meeting and said, we're not going to do that. This is too important. We're not going to let effectively them buy our company for $1 million because they'd have full control. They would have had 4 board seats at that point. And they said no to the deal. And so Jim and I drove back to the office. He lived in Hilton Head. He flew up every Monday morning, flew home on Saturday. And so we got back to the office, and the board told us, you guys have been working your ass off for 18 months trying to get this funding done. Take a break. JP Morgan's coming up in 3 months. We'll restart there. And we got back to the office, and Jim said, well, that was nice of them. They trust us. And I said, yeah, it's nice. I got to go home now and tell my wife that we didn't get funded. And he said, well, I got to go back to Hilton Head. But what do you think about this waiting to JP Morgan? And I said, well, I made 3 calls on the way back to the office. We can't wait another 3 months. That's ridiculous. And he said, good, so let's go to California on Monday. And I said, great. I said, but something you need to know, I mean, besides the fact that the company owes us $1 million, cash-wise, we have $1,087 in the bank right now. And we have a payroll that we have to get out. And he said, okay, well, in an hour, call my wife and ask her to wire us $100,000. And I said, well, you're going to see her tonight when you get home. And he's like, right, in an hour, when I'm on the plane, call my wife and tell her you need her to wire $100,000 to you today before I get home. And I said, all right. So I did, and she did. And that got us through to Cincy Tech and Children's putting together a kind of a debt instrument that kept us alive for a little while. So that's the context for how did we find Sequoia. Then we went and met with 500 to 700 VCs. And I say that we were in California except for 1 week where we went to a conference in Hawaii that Mayo was having 17 weeks in a row. We were in California. Talking to anyone who would talk to us. California investors, I always say, there's the West Coast ignorance and the East Coast arrogance of investors. The East Coast guys know we exist. They just don't care. The West Coast guys it's just this blur, right? They don't, in the middle of the country, they don't even understand where we are, or how we could ever form a company here. This is how it was then, right? And so we'd meet with these guys, and they didn't really get that we were flying out from Cincinnati to meet with them. So we'd come out, and they'd say, "Oh, well, can you meet with us Friday instead?" I'm like, "Well, sure, but it's Monday, right?" I mean, we're in California, in a hotel room. So, and we'd fly out there sometimes for just a couple of meetings, and as it turns out, we were at a meeting with Scale Ventures. Scale Ventures had access to our diligence room. They were in like the third stage of diligence with us. We flew out, had a face-to-face with two of their partners. They were 45 minutes late for the meeting. We were sitting in the conference room. They showed up and said, "We only have 15 minutes. We have another meeting." We started our presentation, and they said, "You realize that we need at least 20 million in revenue for us to invest in you?" And we said, "Well, we've been in diligence with you for a month and a half. You have full access to our diligence room. You've seen all of our financials. You know we have $3 million in revenue right now. Why did we fly out here?" And they're like, "Well, I don't know. You wanted to have a meeting?" I'm like, "No, that's ridiculous." But we sat there and talked to them, and they really liked the company. The one partner was a psychiatrist. The other one's wife was a psychiatrist. They understood the problem. They just couldn't invest. And out of the blue, one of the guys said, "Have you ever heard of Claremont Creek?" And we said no. And he said, "Well, it's way over in Oakland, so I don't know if you'd want to go over there." I was like, "Well, if we climb on top of your building, I can see Oakland." In fairness, though, it's like a 2-hour drive, right? I mean, the bridge was being rebuilt at the time. And he said, "We just were trying to invest with them in another company," which turned out to be Ridge, which is funny because just 6 months ago we almost bought Ridge because they basically went out of business because they never got funded. And that deal fell through. And I think they're looking for a company that looks like you. And we said, "Okay, can you call them? Because we'll go there now," right? And so we called them, and they were there. One of the partners was there. We drove to Oakland, sat down. They loved the product, and they actually told us later they liked that the two founders had some gray hair because most of the people they were meeting with were, 20 years old. No offense to the 20-year-olds in the room. And they got excited, and so we went through some diligence with them. They, one night, I was sitting at the office, and they called, which is interesting that they called the office because it was like 10 o'clock at night, but I answered. They don't understand time zones either sometimes. And they said, "Hey, we're really excited. You're going in front of the full partnership. If you don't know what, you get a sponsor from, like, you get a couple of partners excited, but then they have to sell it to their partnership, and then you have to go sell it to the full partnership. We have 2 meetings coming up where you can do that. One is next week, and so this was in December, and the next one is in February." And I said, "Well, we'll be there Monday, obviously." And he said, "Well, it might be inconvenient." And I said, "Yes, I realize it's Christmas Eve, but we're not going to wait till February, right?" So called Jim. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "I already bought my ticket, so we're going." Went home and told my wife of the time. She was this great, you should see my history of the company presentation because she was this really happy person all through the whole history of the company, right up to the divorce at the end. It's really worked out, so it's okay. I'm over it, and it's happy now. But so that's the downside of the story of Assurex, I guess. But went home. Interestingly, we had 12 people from her family staying at the house for Christmas. Went home and said, "Hey, I'm going to San Francisco on Sunday." And if you think back, now it's a great story. Then it was, "Oh, you're going to San Francisco for the 400th time for somebody to say no to you, and now you're doing it on Christmas Eve when we have 12 people in the house." And I was like, "Well, they're your family, and there's more room now because I won't be here," right? That didn't fly. So Jim and I flew out, did some shopping, brought home to get some extra Christmas presents, and we sat in the partner meeting, did our pitch, everybody was excited, and then the question that always came up, which shouldn't have come up, because we had talked about this many times, because we had Kleiner had given us a term sheet at one point and a few others, but we had to move the company to the West Coast if we took their money. And they said, well, how fast can you move the company to the West Coast? And like the air just went out of the room, because of course we weren't going to do that. And Jim said, well, we're not, and we've had this conversation. And so Jim went on, we had a great speech about it, you know. Most of the research in genetics is actually not done on the coasts. It's mostly done in the big land-grant universities. So Ohio State has a great program. We actually have people from University of Michigan and Ohio State on our scientific advisory board. University of Toronto, Mayo Clinic, of course, is in Minnesota. Cincinnati Children's is here. There was no reason to move the company from that perspective, and I talked about the costs. You know, I pay $6 a square foot a year for my lab space, $6 a minute in, you know, where they are, and even just people. You know, people have to be paid more out there because it costs so much to live there. And they said, okay, well, that all makes sense, but how would you find any informatics people in Cincinnati, Ohio? And I looked at them because I thought they were kidding, right? I mean, it's the most ridiculous question I've ever heard. I ran a $1 billion software company in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Jim, sitting next to me, could feel me tense up, and he actually put his hand on my leg. And I said, well, guys, you know, at night when we come in from the cornfields, and they didn't laugh. See, you guys are from here. They just looked at me. And I said, well, you know, we have these things called co-ops, and not the kind of co-ops like from universities, but like cooperate, you know, it's the farmers. We share combines and grain elevators, and now those organizations have gotten bigger, and now that we have electricity and the internet, we have extension courses from the local universities, and at night when we come in, we take math classes and computer classes, and literally they're like thinking I'm serious. I mean, they're just like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense. I'm looking at them, and so finally, and I'm just going to do, I forgot to say earlier, when I spoke at Brandery earlier last year, they told me that I now officially hold the record for the most F-bombs in a single talk. So, but I literally...
We're at 0 right now.
We are, I know. Well, here we go. I looked at him and I said, are you fucking kidding me?
It's 1.
I said, I ran a $1 billion software company from Cincinnati, Ohio. I said, we have the largest university in the United States, 90 minutes from our office. We have the 23rd largest, 10 minutes from our office. And we have something like 800,000 undergrads within a 2-hour drive of our office in Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky, and Ohio. I think we can find a couple computer guys. And they said, okay, thank you for your time. Jim and I got up and left, and he said, well, I think that went well. I said, well, we got to go buy some more Christmas presents. So flew home, got home the night of Christmas Eve. We had rented out a restaurant, so I was pulling into the parking lot of the restaurant, and Jim called me, and he said, hey, they just called, they're sending us a term sheet tonight, which was pretty exciting, because not only it temporarily saved my marriage, actually, because when I walked in, everybody was very excited to see me except my wife, and then I got to explain that we had gotten a term sheet. Now, what I didn't explain is that getting a term sheet just means that you get to go start working on trying to get people to invest into the term sheet, right? So you have a lead, but you don't have the money yet. So we spent the next 3 months doing that, but they introduced us to Sequoia because Sequoia was interested in the kinds of company that we were. Sequoia, that story, we went and presented to them. We had just hired a new sales guy, head of sales, John Bolano, and this was going to be the first time he pitched. And Jim and I had been doing it so long that, you know, we didn't practice, or, I mean, we used the same deck all the time. We're flying out. He called me the night before and he said, are there like slides or anything? What am I going to say to Sequoia Capital? And I said, oh, well, you'll be fine. It's slide 8 through 10 on the slide deck. So we got out there, we pitched to him. Sequoia is an interesting place, and once we were part of the Sequoia family, it's a cool place, right? I mean, you're out in Menlo Park. They fly you out. They've got great facility. Every person that you talk to will say to you, that's where Steve Jobs sat. And I'm like, I don't care. This is where I sat. That's what you're going to be saying later, right? That was a long time ago, right? You've invested in a lot of companies since then. We went out, we pitched. You get 1 hour, but you don't. You get 10 minutes to set up. You get to talk. You have to be out of the room 10 minutes before the hour so that the next company could come in and get set up. Literally, if a partner is late, they get fined $100 for the meeting. You can't go over because at the end of your thing, when the thing goes off, they just stand up and say, thank you, get out. I mean, it doesn't matter. Mid-thought, guy's asking you a question that's probably the most important question of the day, doesn't matter, you're out. So we went out, we thought it went okay. We had 5 other meetings set up for that trip. While we were in with Sequoia, every one of them left us a message on our phone saying that they needed to postpone it to a following week. And so we went back to the hotel and we were trying to figure out if we were going to even stay in town. Sitting at Knuckles Historical Sports Bar in the Hyatt at the airport. And I was explaining to John that not only was he our newest exec, but that also meant that he probably had more room on his credit cards than Jim and I did. And so he would probably be buying dinner. And then that night, we were just having popcorn out of the popcorn machine and drinking beer. And Jim's phone rang, and from our side of what we could hear, we could tell it was Sequoia, and Sequoia was ready to fill the rest of the round. As a matter of fact, fill the rest of the round, so we had to then juggle some stuff around. And they were truly excited about what we were doing.
And then how long after that did they actually come in and invest?
Like 3 weeks later.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's turn real quick to the exit. Just out of curiosity, when in Assurex's life cycle did you and the board and the other management start actually thinking about selling the company?
So the honest answer is right before we sold it, because we had no intention of selling the company. We filed our S1 in January of 2015. We were going public. We were ready to go. We had our bankers hired. We had Goldman Sachs and Leerink and Blair and Baird as our book runners. And we were going full bore. We had our analyst day. We were doing quarterly mock earnings calls with the actual analysts on Wall Street to practice and to get them up to speed on what was going on. And we went through that period, we went from a likely initial IPO valuation of about anywhere, bankers they give you really big ranges, but anywhere from somewhere in the 400 million to 700 million. None of us believe the 700 million, but that's okay. You go public and then you earn more, right? And then the stock market fell apart. We, especially in biohealth, I was actually on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with our CFO, visiting the floor, because it's fun when you go to the New York Stock Exchange, and we were there for meetings with their marketing people to set up the video feeds back to our office for the party at the office for the people who wouldn't be coming to New York. On the day that the 1,000 point drop happened in the first 5 minutes of trading, which was fascinating to watch on the floor. I can sort of imagine now what it must have been like when the Depression actually hit and what that felt like, but this was much quicker, right? Because the numbers are just up on the screen, just spiraling down. So, and then all the halts came in and they fixed it, but the market just went to hell. And we So we delayed. As a matter of fact, Natera, which was a sister company of ours at Sequoia, they went 2 weeks before that, and we were supposed to go 2 weeks after that. So they went, and their stock went to a fourth of what it was in those 2 days of that kind of mini bear market. They're doing better now. And so we delayed, and it was okay, because we had plenty of money. We had good investors. We didn't need to exit. We had a whole lot of people, some of them are here today, who would remind me constantly that we had to get out because we had to get a good win for Ohio, and we agreed with that. Although it was probably more important just to keep the company alive. We did a mini round where Sequoia and some others put some money in just to make sure we had enough cash, because you get into interesting, weird things with the SEC because you have to be able to show that you're a going concern, so you have to have a year's cash. So even though for most of the history of our company we never had a year's cash, you have to in order to go public. It's one of the rules. And so we had to do a few things like that. And then we were going again. The market picked back up. We had to keep refiling our S1. We started doing analyst days and analyst calls again. And of course, once you file, even though you're secretly filed under the Jobs Act, everybody knows that you're filed. And we started getting calls. So Quest and LabCorp and Myriad and Google, which would have been fun. Microsoft contacted us. So a lot of informatics plays. And the deal that ended up being negotiated with Myriad was by far the best deal, the least risky deal and the best deal for our investors and for our employees. And we are able to take a technology. So they needed us. We're 1/10 of their revenue, so we made them into $1 billion. They were $900 million. Now they're $1 billion company. We're growing at still 80% a year. They're flat because of a lot of things, including the Supreme Court decision. We now already produce more tests a week than they do. And so they saw us as something they wanted to do already. It was already in their strategic plan. And they're a global company and a public company. And so we were able to take the technology. For us, I remember when Jenna Drosos came in from P&G to run the commercialization side, I was recruiting her really hard. And when she finally started, she came in my office on the second day and she said, I actually see what you're talking about now. She's like, I worked at P&G for 25 years. She was group president of one of the divisions. She said, we do everything in statistical case units so that you can compare how much toothpaste shipped to lipstick to toilet paper. And she said, every one of your reports says how many people you helped yesterday. And I said, yeah, it's up on the monitors every single day, what our goal is for the year and how many people we've helped. And, 500,000 people is a lot of people. But it's a drop in the bucket worldwide. And with Myriad's reach throughout the world, we're able to help a lot more people.
Awesome. So selling your company, big decision. Can you maybe give a couple examples of how you leveraged your board of directors or any advisors that you had to the company as you navigated through the sale of the company?
So you need good advisors. The board is interesting. I love all of our board members. I'll caveat what I'm about to say with that. Every one of our board members is fantastic. I'm still friends with all of them. I've been working with a few of them on projects recently. But for most of us, when you fund your company through VCs, your board is mostly filled with VCs, right? So your investors and your board of directors, for the most part, are the same people. I mean, we had 90 names on our cap table, but I only needed to go get 7 signatures to get the percentages that I needed to get anything actually done. And those same people were on the board, except for one. The one person that I had to get all the time, I thought was going to be here today, but I found out he's flying to California right now. Mark Byrne, who was part of the original investment team, and he had enough common shares that you always have to get the common share holder to sign to, so I'd always have to drive to his house and get a signature from him. But everybody else, once the board made a decision, there's fiduciary responsibility. It's a really gray area, right? Because the same guys on the board who just made the decision, and then there's supposed to be a separation because your shareholders are supposed to vote, it's the same guys, right? So, and they're all different, right? I mean, some of them have been in the company for 10 years, and they're an angel fund, and they need a green to show up at their next annual meeting on the board.
Why are you looking at me?
Well, I will say, OTAF and Rev1 were nice enough to have me up a few times. It was always the guys up north who wanted me to come to every meeting, and every time they would ask me, when are you going public, is one of the questions, and in front of the group, and I would always just have to say, if we were filed, I wouldn't be allowed to tell you right now, right? But then there's like Sequoia, who can sit on an investment for 25 years. They don't care. I mean, they've got billions and billions and billions of dollars invested all over the place. And they would just keep telling us, do the right thing, do what's right for the company. And so you've got this kind of mix of people who all have very different ideas, one, about what's right for the company, and then two, what's right for their LPs, right? And it's an interesting problem, and not just for us, I think for many companies. I was actually talking to somebody at the SEC about this recently, and I said, someday you're going to realize that a board that doesn't have enough independent directors on it should have to change that once they file, because the fiduciary, I mean, and it's not because people are bad people, but if you think about it, the guy who's on your board or the woman who's on your board is a director in that fund, and by definition has a fiduciary responsibility to that fund. When they're acting as a board member, they have a fiduciary responsibility to you, but when they're signing the shareholder document, that's the second document that was put in front of them, they're deciding whether it's good for their fund. And so it was interesting. Some people who had been on the board from the very beginning, I mean, I took them out for drinks, and I sat down and literally said to them, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Really? I mean, you sat in that meeting today and you said that? There's no way that is what a board member should be saying about what we should do. You're speaking for XYZ, VC company. And, but we got through it, and in the end, everybody does what's right, and nobody's evil, right? But you also got to we found some great outside advisors that kind of helped us through, and you got to pick good bankers, and not just good bankers because they're good at being bankers, good bankers because they're good people who can actually give you really good advice about what's going on. Goldman was fantastic, but some of the smaller ones too, like Larynx stayed with us. They met us at a JP Morgan 9 years ago. I mean, they were in the garage 5 times before we moved out of it. And they're just smart, good people who will sit down with you over a beer and say, don't let Goldman do that. Because if you haven't done it before, it all sounds great, right? Why would Goldman Sachs be trying to screw us over? Well, of course they are, because they get more fees, right?
So I've got one more question for Don, and then we'll flip it over to the audience, so be thinking about your questions. You had a long run over at Assurex, and I think you're on a much-needed break right now, but what's next in the cards for you?
Well, I've been saying I'm going to Italy, but I just got back from Italy, so that's over. So what's been important to me, and I think you said, actually, you read the article that was in the Cincinnati Business Courier where I've talked about building a foundation, but I'm not old enough yet to retire, so even though I keep telling everybody I'm retired, my Facebook status is retired, but it's a lie. I have been involved in startups and helping other groups who wanted, coming and talking to things like this, helping the Brandery, helping Cincy Tech for a long time. Unbelievably to me, and this is going to sound naive, but I have 15 job offers right now. I haven't updated my resume in 15 years because I'm just Mr. Assurex, right? They don't know much, well, some of them do, but people walk up to me in bars when FounderCon was down to, people would just walk up to me and say, what are you doing next? Do you want to come run our company? A lot of those companies are not in Ohio. I had an offer to go to Milwaukee. My mom wouldn't have allowed that. It is kind of funny, when you're from the west side of Cincinnati, so my mom, I went over for Thanksgiving, and I told her that I had a job offer in Milwaukee, and she said, Milwaukee sucks. And I said, have you been to Milwaukee? And she's like, no, it's Laverne and Shirley, but it's too far away from here. And I said, well, you're right. And then her husband told me that she had recently told him that he had to clean out his office in their basement because I might have to move back in because I was out of work. And my 27-year-old son, who still works at Assurex, she said to him that day, are you going to keep working at Assurex? And he's like, not long term, I don't think. And she's like, well, I guess you guys could share a room here. I'm like, Mom, I'm okay, right? But I'm lucky enough to have time to decide what I wanted to do. And what I really wanted to do was, I kept saying, I don't want to build the next Pokemon Go. I don't want to...
That's disappointing to about 40% of the audience here.
Right. Well, there's other people that I know who can build the next Pokemon Go. But, I've built software my entire life. We built 911 systems. We built classified stuff that I can't talk about. We built missile defense systems. We built Disney's, we helped Disney build their Easy Pass system. We built all the stuff that the IRS, we built cool stuff. We built 911 systems. And you could always tell yourself, hey, we're getting to work with the latest technology. That's really cool. And look, we're putting food on people's tables, and 911 systems are good things. But there was always at least one level of, of being away from what really was going on. I was lucky enough to work for a company, and because I was the founder, they would take the cool calls that came into advocacy, and I would get to talk to some of these people. And we would bring them in and have them talk to the company too. And one day a woman called me and told me that, she called me, she was crying. She called to tell me that she had gotten the test for her daughter, her 9-year-old daughter, a couple of weeks ago. And they changed her medication and treatment because of the test, and that morning, she had heard her 9-year-old daughter laugh for the first time in her life. And when you work in a place that does those types of things, leaving and building a new CRM system for somebody or something, not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just, I wanted to make a difference, and I have the ability to do that now because I, made some money on the sale of the company. So anyway, really long story, only a little bit long. I was entertaining a number of ideas about another startup, and then I decided that I could actually do more good by helping lots of startups. So I actually announced on LinkedIn yesterday, but this is the first public announcement, that I am now a partner in Refinery Ventures down in Cincinnati. It's a new fund that we're raising. I can't talk much about the fund because SEC rules and we're raising. But my part of the company is very different. We really feel, if you go back 10 years, we had Cincy Tech and we had some angels in Ohio, and not a lot of help. There was no brandery. There was this cool place. I remember, right after this opened, I was up here in a meeting. There wasn't a lot of help from a financing standpoint and from a entrepreneur standpoint. And we firmly believe that all throughout Ohio there is great technology, there are great ideas, there are great resources, people resources. When people talk about not being able to find software developers and those types of things, they're wrong. The people are here. What we don't have, because I firmly believe that clusters of startups feed on themselves. You need some to actually succeed in order for the next ones to happen. We don't have a whole lot of people who have hyper-grown companies. We don't have people who've taken a company from a garage and made it into a $100 million company and sold it for $500 million. We don't have, I was introduced recently, I already knew him, but I was introduced at a party in California to the gentleman who was the founder of TOA. And I was introduced to him as the only guy in Cleveland who has successfully exited in the last few years. And he looked at me and he said, well, I know who you are. you're the only person in Cincinnati who's, and I said, right, and so let's go get Matt, and then we'll have the Columbus one, and we'll, you know, we'll form a little fun club. And it's always bothered me. I grew up in Cincinnati. I was born in Cincinnati. I went to Xavier University, so I've been here my whole life. And even when I ran companies on the coasts, I still lived here. And I think what we can do is bring a number of those people back and create an environment where we have more people who have built these types of companies to help all of the people here who are trying to help companies, right? If you haven't done it, you literally haven't done it, right? And so there's so much that happens while you're trying to build a company that if you haven't been through it, you might as well learn from people who know how to do it. So I'm going to be bringing those people back here. We will have seed money for their ideas and for other ideas that are going on. And then the difference, I think, which is kind of the next step in the evolution beyond some of the things that have been going on in Cincinnati and Columbus and Cleveland, is that we will have milestones for those companies, and we will already have earmarked money for their first A round also if they make those milestones. So.
Thanks, Don. Congratulations on your next move, and we're glad that you'll be staying here in Ohio. Can we move over to some audience questions? I think we've got time for one or two. Yes, over here.
Don, what do you think is where is PGX kind of in the life cycle?
That's a good question. So I think that technology-wise, it's still pretty early. I think, and it's what needs to happen, and what I was actually starting to do in the company was marry it with other types of technology, so big data type technology. So for example, I was in negotiations with 8451, which is the Kroger big data company, because things like, if you think about mostly what we did were mood disorders and psychiatric conditions, those types of things. It's not just, you know, our algorithms happen to be genetics, going through an algorithm, coming out and telling you which medication would work. There's lots of treatment options that aren't medications, and there's lots of things that affect whether that drug's going to work or not that aren't genetic, right? So we could make a 70% difference in the people who would have failed not failing, but there's still that other 30%, right? And there's all kinds of things that happen even once you get them on the right medication. And so if you think about, you know, I used to always tell my guys, so here's what I want. I want, first of all, in 10 years, when I get to come back and do the history of the company presentation, I'll come in my hover, you know, wheelchair, and everybody will say, oh yeah, Don, we saw his picture on the wall. And I'll tell the story, and they'll say at the end, oh my gosh, I forgot, we used to be a genetics company, right? You know, we still have that lab, but it's 1% of what we do, and it's 10 times more than what we did. And because there's so much more that you can put into those algorithms, biologically, there's proteins and all types of other things, and especially proteins if you want to do kind of what point in time instead of predisposition. But then also, it has to be true that Kroger already can determine whether or not they're going to give you a loan based on your spending habits, and they already know when your spending habits are changing. And if your spending habits and what you're buying change dramatically, and you have a predisposition for this, and you're on this medication, we ought to be able to predict that you're about to have a break, right? And so there's all kinds of stuff. Now, the hard part, and this is where I'll get political for a second, the United States slows this stuff down so much because they don't pay for it. We were the only test that was being paid for by Medicare. Good for us. It's why all of our competitors went out of business, literally. The same day we got the positive decision, they put out a negative decision on every other technology in our space. So we got paid, everybody else didn't. But unless you want to go out and raise, you know, $400 million, you can't do it. You can't get paid for these technologies. And so it's very difficult to start a company. And you know, if Jim and I hadn't had American Express cards with unlimited, you know, spending, we wouldn't have made it. So.
Other questions? Up front. We got a mic coming up, so.
So What was it that drove you to keep taking on the risk that you were taking personally, financially, to keep going with this company?
Well, I played soccer growing up, and I got hit in the head a lot. Yeah. No, it's really interesting. That's a great question, because I talked to, especially, I used to do even more, but when I go down and talk to Cincy Tech guys that are struggling, a lot of times it's to give them advice. You really need a better lawyer, and whatever. Let's do this. How would you structure this deal? But a lot of it is going out and having beers and reminding them that just 3 years ago we were still in a garage, and that we were out of money 4 years ago again. I always say keeping these things alive is just force of will. You just do it. You get up every morning and you show up. David Wilbrand, who's probably the only lawyer down there that any of the startups use, except that he's conflicted because everybody uses him. He's a good friend of mine, and I was talking to him about the same thing, and I said, because he was there the whole time too, and I said there was never a day, never, that I thought that we were going to succeed. I mean, we wanted to succeed, right? There was never, reporters would come in when we moved out of the garage and they'd say, oh, what's it like to have finally turned the corner? And I'm like, I'll let you know if we ever do. I don't, every day something terrible happens, right? But there was also never a day where I thought we were going to fail. Part of it is just ignoring that. You literally just show up and keep going. And when you don't, people, my mom would ask me all the time, she worked at a grocery store. She's like, how did you make payroll? Well, she would always say, ever since you left Attachment, you've been in like 5 companies, not a single one of them has been profitable. How do you pay people? I said, well, we borrow money from other people and pay them. And she couldn't understand that, right? And there's logistical problems, like how do you make payroll when you only have $1,000 in the bank? And you make a phone call and you drive to Cleveland, and when you get there, the guy's not home, but his wife says, oh, it's his, on Thursdays he still goes into the dentist office that his son is now running and hangs out. And so you drive to the dentist office and you say, dude, you told me you were going to give me a check. And he gives you a check, and you drive back, and then you realize it's not going to clear in time, so you call the president of PNC Bank, Kay Geiger, and at home, and you say, I'm on my way to your house, I'm going to hand you a check, I need it to be in the account because payroll's going to bounce tomorrow. And she says, okay. It's that ridiculous, right? You fly to Minnesota and pick up a check and fly back the same day because they can't get it to you fast enough, and they won't wire it. But it really is, and I really do believe this. I say it all the time. It's force of will. You just make it happen, and it's if you haven't lived it, you don't truly appreciate what I'm saying right now, but you literally do just wake up every day and go. And you do when they call and say, I want to meet you in California tomorrow morning at 9, as ridiculous as it is to get on a plane and fly to California, knowing that they're going to say no anyway, you still do it. Because if you don't, back to the question about how many people did we meet with and how do we get those investments done, I say all the time, it's luck, right? It's good or bad luck. And what you do is you do all the things that you need to do. You build good companies, you have good ideas, you make smart decisions, you put yourself in a position so when the luck happens, you can take advantage of it. But there's always that piece of luck. There's always the Scale Ventures just had a deal fall through with Claremont, and so they called, and the guy happened to be there, and we went over, and he liked what he heard. But the problem is you go in and talk to VCs, and on that any given day, you're not just competing with whether you have a good company or not, or whether they have money in their fund. The woman might have had a fight with her husband that morning. They got cut off coming in, you sound like something that they invested in before that failed. They don't like your tie, whatever, right? They don't like Cincinnati. They went to Michigan, and they don't like Ohio. All those things are true because they're people. And so you're fighting all of those things, and I always say, even Tiger Woods is a bad example now, but Tiger Woods and I playing golf, if I can get a chip to within 3 feet of the cup, I have the exact same chance of it going in a hole as he does. The difference is he can get it within 3 feet of the cup 90% of the time, and I can't, right? So if you have to go talk to 1,000 people to get the one, then you have to go talk to the 1,000 people, right? Because you don't know which one it's going to be. So, I mean, it's really that. Beyond that, it was easier in a place, literally, where people were calling me and saying, "You saved my child's life." That helps. It's good perspective when you're fighting about budgets and you look up at the wall and there's a testimonial from a guy who said, "I tried to commit suicide and then you saved my life and thank you," and came and talked to us. So that made it easier too. But again, I think no matter what your company is, you just do it. And I mean, you just do. Get good people around you, but just keep showing up.
Don, remarkable story. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us today. Can we give Don a big round of applause? Are you going to stick around afterwards? And if you got any other questions, feel free to come up and talk to Don. And I'm going to kick it back over to Andrea to close us out.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much again, Don. It was an incredible story. And, you know, I'm sure we are all itching to hear a lot more of it. But also, thank you so much, Mike, for moderating. You both did a fabulous job today. So just a couple quick announcements before you all head out, being conscientious of your time. We do hold this event monthly. So next month, we're going to be featuring Al Hawkins with Milo Biotechnology. We're going to be talking about how they have brought a groundbreaking treatment to market. So that's going to be on April 19th from 11:30 a.m. till 1 p.m. Also, remember, if you'd like to be involved in the START Fund, you can go online to cbusstart.org to learn more information about that. And you can also become involved by volunteering with Franklinton Gardens. Last but not least, if you're interested in a tour of Rev1 facility, we're going to be gathering back there, and we'll get that started in about 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you all again so much for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.